Umlakut, Ullukut, afternoon actually, is it almost? Not quite. Thank you. My water here is sliding around here. And my slides are ready. Just coming in last night from the Arctic, my homeland. The ice, the snow, the cold. And we want to keep it that way. It's good to be here. It's my first time in Salt Lake City. I am speaking more and more in the United States and connecting and making some of those connections and talking about the issues of connectivity, which is so important. Because I think I'm a firm believer that it is because of the disconnect that we are debating this issue of climate change in the first place. And I lived traditionally on the land, traveling only by dog team the first 10 years of my life in a little place called Kuujjuaq in Nunavik. And I'm now living in Nunavut, which is the newest territory that was negotiated back in 1999 in Canada. And I live in the capital. And I am sure there's many interesting things that have been talked about here in the last couple of days. And I'm sorry I missed yesterday, as I flew in only yesterday late in the day. But as I say, and we always have been saying, that what is happening in the Arctic is very much connected to everything else in the world. And of course, certainly it's connected to everything that's happening here in your homeland, in this area. And the Arctic, in fact, plays a very important role, and I'm going to talk about some of these issues. And this role, by the way, is I think, being more and more recognized on these important issues of global warming, not just global warming, but climate changes. And almost 3 years ago, the Governing Council of the United Nations Environment Program passed a resolution urging more attention to the Arctic as a result of that. We've become the early warning, the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, on what is happening here. And of course, the importance of the Arctic is well documented, and particularly in the last few years and in the last year and a half or so since the work of the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment. Well, for us in the Arctic, more than 20 years now, we have been witnessing major changes that are happening in our homelands. And of course, as you can appreciate, we are a hunting culture. We remain a hunting culture. And our culture is based on the cold. It's based on the snow. It's based on the ice. And these changes that are happening now are just so evident, and we witness them every day, and we are going through the challenges every day. And that's the melting of the permafrost, the thinning of the ice, the receding glaciers. There is an invasion, even more species of insects and animals that have never been seen in the Arctic. There is increased coastal erosion. And there is longer and warmer summers and shorter winters. And the magnitude of these changes vary from place to place, but they are quite consistent. And it's not because there are more people and buildings close to where this is happening. So these changes, and I just want to make something that has happened very fresh. February 26th, my oldest child, daughter's birthday, her 30th birthday last Sunday, in Iqaluit, where I come from, which is in the Arctic. We reached, in Fahrenheit, 47 degrees. It was between 6 and 8 degrees Celsius in Iqaluit last Sunday. It rained, pouring rain, for a couple of days. I woke up, my home is on the tundra, with pools of water in my backyard, and it wasn't freezing because it was 6 above. These are things that are happening. Raining when it should be snowing, and the ice forming this very slippery crust even on top of the ice, making it very difficult for anyone to travel on. So what is happening in the Arctic is, in fact, affecting every facet of our life in the Arctic. And we are a people of the land and the snow, as I say, and our hunting culture absolutely thrives on that. And we need to have it cold to maintain that way of life. It's an important part of the entire planet's ecosystem, the Arctic, very much so. And already we're having a hard time adjusting and adapting to these changes. And our hunters already are falling through this thinning ice. I have a neighbor across the street who lost his legs as a result of falling through the ice a few years ago. A seasoned, revered hunter in his late 60s who have always known very well, with much wisdom, the conditions of ice. Today what you see on the surface is not what it is under, because the Arctic sink is warming and the ice is forming very, very differently. The rain last week is going to create a lot of havoc to the wildlife, because the caribou now will not be able to, even with their hoofs, go through the ice that has crusted over with the rain, where normally it can still get to the lichen by just digging and getting getting to its food source with the snow. But now with the ice, it will not be able to do so. And as a result of that, in the spring, they will be very thin, and of course their calves will not be hungry, or will not be healthy. And so these are it's about people, yes, it's about our wildlife, and these are everyday things that are happening to us already. Now, I'm not sure if you had anybody here that was involved in the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment, but I will be leaving behind some pamphlets and booklets and so on the work, that tremendous work that was done by over 300 scientists from 15 countries. This assessment, the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment, is the most comprehensive, detailed assessment of climate change, and it's on the circumpolar world. And it was started in Barrow 2000. Years to make this assessment with, as I say, 13 scientists, and it involved traditional knowledge. It is a remarkable piece of scientific work. Just to get 3 scientists to agree is something, but 300, and they are remarkable scientists, many of them from the United States. And in fact, it was chaired by Bob Carell, who is with the Meteorological Institute of America, and he's also with Harvard University. He so aptly chaired this assessment. Remarkable work that has been done there. It was released in 2004, and of course created a lot of media, but it was very shocking, very stark reading. And of course newspapers from all over the world were able to pick that up and feature a lot of what was happening there. Now I'm supposed to be, there we go, every once in a while. So basically what the ACIA is saying is that there are 3 things. Climate change is happening in the Arctic now. It's going to get worse. And it is, and the changes in the Arctic are globally important. And the ACIA includes examples as well as illustrations of traditional knowledge, which makes it quite groundbreaking in that sense as well, because oftentimes traditional knowledge over the course of many, many decades have been dismissed as anecdotal and not real, and we have been able to marry both Western science and traditional knowledge in this. I'm going to read 2 quick conclusions of the ACIA, and when I read them, please remember that we Inuit are an ancient people that are very connected to our hunting culture based on the ice and the sea. Marine species dependent on sea ice, including polar bears, ice-living seals, walrus, and some marine birds, are very likely to decline, with some species facing extinction. And for Inuit, warming is likely to disrupt or even destroy their hunting and food-sharing culture, as reduced sea ice causes the animals on which they depend to decline, become less accessible, and possibly become extinct. Now, scientists are cautious people, and they're rightly so, but they're really not pulling any punches at all in the ACIA work. And this is because they're quite confident in their findings and their projections. And it correlates with what we have been witnessing over the last few decades in the Arctic as a people, because we are on that land and we're on that ice every single day, so we're able to witness and observe and experience the most minute of changes that are happening to this planet, because we are a people of the ice and snow, and it is melting very quickly, and it's happening first and fastest in the Arctic. And so And these projections, by the way, and Bob would, if he were here, would tell you they're quite conservative. But things are now starting to pick up very, very quickly. Now, we're an adaptable people. We're a resourceful people. We have always managed to adapt to different situations. But, you know, with the ACIA and the projections and what is happening now and what we're witnessing today in the Arctic, I think within the lifetime of my own 8-year-old grandson, things are going to be so very dramatically changed in the Arctic that we're not going to be able to maintain what we have for a millennia as a hunting culture. And we're really struggling already. The first wave of change that occurred, as I said, I grew up traveling only by dog team the first 10 years of my life, and now fly jumbo jets and jets all over the world, just to give you that window of how quickly things have changed in our world. And so we're still reeling from that first wave of change that has occurred to us as a people in the Arctic. And we've come from a highly independent way of life, very, very connected to the cycles and the rhythms of nature and the ecosystems and the wildlife and so on. We have lived sustainably for millennia without yet depleting one species of an animal. And any of the challenges that we have in terms of species are not of our doing, and the challenges that we face are a result of some historical things that have happened with some of our whaling and so on. So we know that the importance of what is happening in the Arctic is so much connected to everything else. And I think if I can just ask you, you know, now that we know, because I think it's so important that if we're going to be erring on any side, it should be on the side of caution. Because no matter how we look at it, and no matter how, take away science even, but if you look at the real effects that are happening at the ground level in terms of what's happening to the real people, and whose lives depend upon the climate being a certain way, and how we know now that what's happening in the Arctic is as a result of of human-induced CO2. And that is very much, I travel the world speaking, very much now almost a global consensus. There are very few, I think now, that don't believe this is the case. And many, of course, from the United States as well, are very much on board with this. So when you see all of these things happening, I think, you know, I often ask this question of how would you respond yourselves if an international assessment prepared by more than 300 scientists from 15 countries were to tell you that your ancient culture was going to be doomed in one lifetime, and that you would probably become a footnote in the history of globalization? What would you do? And what is it that one can do when you're 155,000 Inuit in the entire world in 4 countries? So small, just a little blip on that radar screen. Sometimes, often, I would say, in our own countries, much less the world. And for people to understand that the issue of connectedness and the connectivity issue is one that really, I think, is going to be that common ground that will bring us together to do the right thing. And I've attended many, many conferences around the world, and I have been to the Conference of the Parties in Italy, in Buenos Aires, and recently in Montreal, in working with other countries of the world to try to get the issues dealt with. But, you know, oftentimes it becomes about technology and politics, and it becomes about trading carbon sinks and emissions trading, but you never feel the heartbeat of a people. You never see the human face when you go into these international forums. And so climate change is not just about science. It's not just about bureaucrats scurrying around. To us, and I think to all of us in the planet, it's about people. It's about family. It's about children. It's about how we're going to try to make this planet work for us for as long as it can. And even though, yes, there are natural cycles of change, and we ourselves understand that very well, we know now that this is way beyond. And so, because we are a people that still remain very connected and are one with our way of life, with hunting of all of our animals, our marine mammals, and so on, and that the process of the hunt is so much what it personifies for us to be Inuit. We are, after all, the people of the land and the snow, and the land and the wisdom of the land is so much misunderstood in terms of a hunting culture. And we pass a kind of knowledge down to our young people, generation to generation. My grandson already at 8 is learning this age-old culture, hunting with his father and learning what it's like not just to be able to go out and kill animals, because hunting is way beyond the killing of animals. This is about teaching character and character skills to young people. If any of you have ever had a window into our world and the rapid changes that have occurred into our Inuit world, where things have happened so very quickly in a very short period of time, where other societies, it has taken them perhaps 350 years to adjust and adapt from a hunting, gathering culture. For us, it's 50, 60, 70 years. Sometimes I say that in my 52 years of life, I feel as though I've lived 3 lifetimes, because things have happened so very quickly. And so we're reeling from that first initial wave of change, and comes with that our social and family and community challenges. We are known, the Inuit world is known, to have the highest suicide rates in North America. And that's mainly our young men between the ages of 16 and 24. How is it that we have come from such a highly independent, strong way of living to so highly now dependent, whether it be to substances, whether it be to institutions, whether it be to processes? As we're trying to grapple with these issues and come out the other side of this modernization, and realizing now that many answers and solutions lie in the wisdom of our culture, the hunting culture, because when you're out there on the land, you are teaching the child how to be patient, how to be courageous, how to be bold under pressure, how to withstand stress, how not to be impulsive, how to have sound judgment, how to be wise in making life choices. The very things that a transitioning culture needs at this time to help our young men choose life and not take their own is where we're at in the Inuit world. And as we're coming out the other side of that transitioning world, we realize we're being poisoned from afar, where our Inuit nursing mothers have to think twice about nursing their babies because the toxin levels of persistent organic pollutants are so high in their nursing milk compared to anywhere else. We're the net recipients in the Arctic because it's diet related, because we're eaters of marine mammals, and these toxins end up in the Arctic sink in the marine mammals, and then they bioaccumulate and biomagnify, and then we end up carrying body burdens way higher than anywhere else. And then our climate is changing so fast that we can't keep up with these changes, where our fathers and grandfathers are still trying to pass that wisdom down so that our young men can survive and embrace life, and yet now say, I'm not sure, son or grandson, how to tell you today about the conditions that will be because of the winds and the sea ice and all of these changes that are happening so quickly. I'm not sure. I'll have to tell you the traditional wisdom, but I will have to put a disclaimer or a qualifier to everything I say now. So this is where we are at. A small number of people in the world, a people that I think should count, no matter how small a number we are, because we are there for a reason. There is a much larger reason why we are a people of snow and the ice. And I think as much as we are being challenged in this way, it is important that we put this perspective in human terms. A people who are being the most challenged at a very human level every day as we go out, wondering how safe it will be, I think, and struggling with these very life-challenging issues of suicides and social challenges. I would think that's a natural fit, don't you, that we would be telling this story to the world, that we are not just powerless victims over the matter, but that we can be the messenger to what is happening to this planet. And that is the role that we feel that we want to give to the world. It is, in fact, the issues of humanity that we feel we can give and share. We are always and have been a very sharing culture to begin with. Excuse me. And we continue to do so. This is the teaming that I'm talking about, the dog team that I grew up in the first 10 years of my life on the ice. Now, we have decided that we were going to blaze some new trails here in terms of ways in which to deal with this issue. We have been very challenged throughout the process of trying to get the science heard, the traditional knowledge heard over the course of the quite a few years now. And the challenges have been very, very great in terms of being really well understood and respected for what was happening in the Arctic. And so we have decided over 3 years ago that we need to really put this on the map. And we decided that we would make this not only a humanity issue, we would definitely make this a human rights issue. And now we started the process over 3 years ago of wondering what instruments out there exist. What recourse do we, as so few number in the world, have to protect our rights, to protect our way of life? And what is it that we can do to do that, to address these issues and be heard? So we started to explore the different avenues, and we started to explore the different organizations and institutions and instruments that exist out there to protect people. And so we, following 2 years of preparation for this very important work of putting ourselves on the map in terms of human rights, we launched a petition. It's not a lawsuit, but it is a petition to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights based in Washington, D.C. We worked with Earth Justice in San Francisco. We worked with the Center for International Environmental Law in Washington. We worked with 2 university students, one from Dartmouth and one from Harvard. And we filed this petition, 62 named Inuit, plus myself, from northern Canada and from northern Alaska, on behalf of all the Inuit in Canada and Alaska. And our petition asks the Commission to come to the Arctic to find out what climate change is doing to our environment. We seek a declaration from the Commission that the United States, the source of approximately 25% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, is indeed violating our human rights, as detailed in the 1948 Declaration on the Rights and Duties of Man. And this declaration from the Commission may not be enforceable, but it really has high moral and political value. And we need this high moral ground if we are to persuade, I think, and encourage the United States and other governments around the world, including businesses and industries and NGOs, to start to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Because we take that science that has been done at value. We really do. We really do. We don't have any qualms about that, and we don't have any hesitation that this isn't the case for us, and it isn't the case for the planet. We feel it is. And again, let me state that this isn't about money. It isn't about seeking for damages, because we didn't want that to be part of the equation where it would be easily dismissed that they're just after money. That isn't the case at all. We just really want to have the opportunity to educate and to encourage the United States to join the community of nations in a global campaign to combat climate change. And I think that's what I mean by it's important that the Arctic continues to be that bridge to the world. Now, what are our rights specified in the 1948 Declaration that are being violated? In fact, the petition specifies: 1, the right to life and physical security, the right to personal property, the right to health, the right to practice our culture, the right to use land traditionally used and occupied, and the right to the means of subsistence. And absolute global reductions in emissions of greenhouse gases is absolutely required if we want to ensure the survival of our hunting and food sharing culture. And this isn't going to happen unless the United States joins the global community to address this very, very important issue of combating climate change. And what is the relief that we're seeking from the Commission? Well, we're seeking, what we're asking for in addition to the declaration is that we've asked the Commission to recommend to the United States, number one, to adapt mandatory measures to limit its emissions of greenhouse gases in cooperation with the community of nations. Two, we take into account the impact of U.S. Greenhouse gas emissions on the Arctic and Inuit before approving all major government actions. Three, in consultation with us, the Inuit of the Arctic, develop a plan to protect Inuit culture and the Arctic environment and mitigate any harm caused by U.S. greenhouse gases. And fourth, in cooperation with Inuit, to develop a plan to help Inuit adapt to unavoidable climate change impacts. Now, these are very reasonable requests, and they're responsible suggestions, in our opinion. And they are the sort of things government of any political stripe would be doing anyway to protect and help their citizens. And we are citizens of Canada, and our Alaskan Inuit are citizens of America. And it's also there, of course, to try to help promote sustainable development. Now, just let me say a few words about the spirit of the petition. Again, this is not an angry piece of work. This is not sourced from anger. This is not a confrontational piece. This is a powerful piece, nevertheless, though. Although it's not a lawsuit, it's a very powerful and a very assertive legal defense of our human rights. And as I said, it's not about seeking for damages and for compensation. I think we have petitioned a commission that has been set up already by the governments in the Americas to promote and protect human rights. And we all share that. It's not even our intent. Media oftentimes has said, this is not a very powerful piece or legal piece. It's not a lawsuit, so they're just trying to embarrass the United States in doing the right thing. It hasn't even been that. It hasn't even been that to try to embarrass anyone, but to try to get people to understand that by looking at the Arctic, you are foreseeing the future of the entire planet. And our petition is a means of inviting the United States to come and talk about these things, not only just to us, but put it into the context of human rights, where it belongs. And our intent, of course, is to encourage and to inform. And democracies, we know, public opinion eventually becomes public policy. And that's what we're trying to do, is to try to change the attitudes of not only the citizens of America, but by the way, I work with many, many citizens of America. I work with Tom Kelly and Jane Kelly from San Francisco, Kyoto, USA, and have spoken to many, many venues and with other organizations. And I have to tell you that there are many, many Americans that are way ahead of their own government, and they really are moving faster in many, many states to address this issue. And that is very encouraging. Our petition is aimed at trying to change the hearts and the minds of people through looking through the lens of what the struggles that we're faced with in the Arctic. And it's in fact, in reality, and I said this in Montreal when I was there in December, it is a gift to the world. It is a gift from our elders, from our hunters, as they give you that insight into what is happening to this planet. And we are a people who still, as I say, are very connected to the natural environment and still very much in tune to its wisdom. We are there every day from my own home. I live on the tundra, and my view is of what you call, or better known as, the Frobisher Bay. And you see the hunters coming back and forth. You know, my grandson, who is 8, hunts with his father, and it's going to be so important for him to be given the tools, not only the love and the safety that we are going to be giving this little boy, but he is going to be growing up in that influence of a transitioning culture where it's already very difficult, and the odds are stacked up against him in terms of surviving the social and cultural problems that we are facing today. that I have always said, and I say this, that the petition is probably the most loving act that I have ever brought forward, not only in protection of my culture, but in protection of the future of the young people who are living up north. And here he is, my grandson. His name is Lee Naula Arnakalla Kisawatsia Mr. And he is named after an auntie, and this is off script here, who took her own life at the age of 15. Her name was Missy. And we wanted, in our culture, we name our children after those who have passed away, and they become part of them again. They come back to us in that way. And although he's a little boy, we named him Mr. as part of his name because her name was Missy, and because now he's a boy. He will grow up in all of that challenge. He will grow up in all of that, what we are going through in the north, in the Arctic, with our communities. And it's important, I think, that as a loving act in this place of influence that I have been blessed to have been in for the past almost 11 years, doing this international work on behalf of the Arctic and our people, that it is a place that I think is an important place in this time in history, that we all have to start to think in terms of the future, not just for my grandson here, but for all of our grandsons, because that connectivity issue, again, and I will close with that, is so important. It is because we have lost touch with our connectivity and the connectedness to one another that we are debating this issue in the first place, as I said earlier on. It is because people have lost that connection to themselves and their environment, and between themselves and their neighbor, whether their neighbor is next door, whether their neighbor is in the next country, and for us it's even in the next hemisphere, is why we are debating this issue. And if we can come together to reconnect in the places that count, and that's about the future of our children and our grandchildren, and make this a human issue. And I hope that you will understand that the work that we have been doing and blazing that new trail, and as people said, a very courageous act, well, that's the very least I think that I can do in the position that I'm in, is to bring that petition so that we can really capture the attention of the world and make people realize that the Arctic is very much connected to all of us, no matter where we are. And I've often said, and I say this all the time, is that the Inuk man falling through, the Inuk hunter falling through the thinning ice, is very much connected to the cars we drive, the disposable world we have come to be, and the industries that we support, and the government policies that we support or not support. Everything connects. And if we can get back that sense of connectivity to one another, then perhaps we can have that sense of responsibility that what happens in Mexico or Russia or the United States is very much connected to the challenges that we face ourselves in the Arctic. And so that's the message that we are trying to bring to the world. And I hope that it is going to be received as such, and I hope that the act of the petition, that is a very strong, legal, assertive action, even though it's not a lawsuit, is one of an act of love and generosity to the world. And that's the message that I would like to end with today. Nakomni.
Sure.
We have about 5 minutes.
Yes.
I just want to thank you for coming here today and to ask you to talk about the alternative sources of food you have and what is observed in the animals.
The alternative food sources that we have, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Living in the Arctic, we hunt all of our animals, our marine mammals, our caribou, and so on. We don't have a big choice alternatives. When we live in the Arctic, anything else that comes beyond the wildlife that we're able to hunt comes at a great cost. whether if we're going to be eating other foods from the south, for example, that will be twice or three times the price of eating our country food. Also, the nutritional value of our country food is way much higher than anything else that we can buy in a store, for example. And because we are a people who live on the ice and snow where it can be 50 below at times, we hope it will continue that way, we need to be warmed by the highly nutritional value of our marine mammals and our caribou that we're eating, which is sometimes 4 times the higher amount of nutritional value. What was your second question?
The second question was, I was curious about your personal observations and the observations
Yeah.
of the village. What's going on with the area?
There's a lot happening. As I said, the example of the caribou that I told you about, where they're going to be now thinner, and that's happening every year now that there's rainfall during the winter. They're having a great deal of difficulty getting to their food source, and then they become very thin in the spring, and then the calves are not healthy. Also, along the riverbanks, when ice used to break up in big chunks and scour the riverbanks, and as it scoured the riverbanks, it would clip off the willows, and then a few weeks later the new willows would come, and then caribou would come, and they would feed off of this. Everything connects. But now what's happening with the spring coming earlier and the ice not even melting in big clumps or chunks, it's just thinning, and then it's just gone. There is no scouring effect on the banks of the river, and as a result of no scouring, it's not clipping off any of the willows, and then the caribou come by weeks later and there's nothing else. There's no new willows to eat. Those kinds of things are happening more and more. Our marine mammals, because of the persistent organic pollutants, of course, are struggling enormously, and they have been. They carry body burdens of persistent organic pollutants, which are passed down to us, of course, because we're avid marine mammal eaters. The polar bear is struggling as well. We don't know the threshold. With all of what's happening with the POPs issue and the climate change issue is that we don't know just how much of the body burden our animals are carrying in terms of toxins and the immune systems, and how much longer it will be before they completely break down. I am sure there's going to be a tipping point at some point with all of these things, but of course with our animals even more so. And we don't know what will happen in the next little while as this warming trend continues in the rapid way that it is in the Arctic. So we are still being able to hunt successfully up to a certain point, but with a lot of caution now, of course, because there are more and more accidents. My neighbor, as I said, who fell through the ice, there are more and more incidences of people falling through the ice. There are incidences of hunters who have been able to pass streams where it was safe to pass streams to go onto other hunting grounds. Because of the glaciers melting so quickly, those streams have become torrent rivers, and we've had a drowning as a result of that. And there's more and more of that is also going to happen.
New coal-fired power plant every week, and especially in places like Manchuria, where high latitude and upwind.
Yeah, I don't speak a lot of science, but I can respond this way. The Arctic Climate Impact Assessment, Bob Carell's work with 300 scientists from 15 countries, it's very clear when they speak about these issues just when all of that really started to escalate. And there is a correlation and there's an absolute connection to what's happening. But I would really invite you, and I will put some pamphlets out as well as connections to their websites and so on, where you can look up some of that remarkable science that has been done recently. That just came out about a year ago. It's recent.
One more question.
Yes?
How long have you been controlled in this area, and have you seen changes similar to this, or big changes in your traditional history that have happened?
Well, we've been around for thousands of years. I know that we all started in one place at one time in history, and some people say Mongolia, and we tend to think maybe around that way. but we're one people that span across 4 countries, and it's evident that we have gone from one place and traveled down from Alaska, from Siberia is where we are. We are about 2,000 Inuit in Siberia down to Alaska and across to Canada over to Greenland. We're one people divided by our national boundaries, but we have a common language, the common culture, and so on. And repeat.
The second question was, have you seen large changes before this time in your traditional?
There's always been, changes happening, and as I say, we are a people that firmly believe that changes do happen, but this is way beyond, above and beyond the normal cycles of anything that any of our elders have ever seen in their lifetime. And we are now starting. There is another process in place that people are starting to make another research project on a time where there tended to be some warming happening in, I believe, in the 1920s or 30s, and people are going to start to look at that issue as to what happened there. But it's nothing like what we're seeing today. This is way off the charts. We've never seen anything like this. Yes? There's one more there.
Just give us an idea of the rate of population change among all the Inuit people. You said there are about 115, is that right?
155,000.
And that would be in all 4
All 4 countries.
talked about.
That's right.
And
That's right.
do you have any longitudinal numbers? Is that the population growing rapidly?
Yes, we have a very high death rate. As I say, the suicide rates are the highest in North America, and other deaths caused by accidents and so on. But we also have an extremely high birth rate. They do. They do. They do net out. They do net out. But again, I can connect you with the Human Development Report that was done under the Arctic Council, similar to what the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment was. What we call the Arctic Human Development Report, again chaired by Orrin Young, an American who's now at the Bren School in Santa Barbara. That is a remarkable piece of work in itself as well that will be able to tell you more of what you're asking. Yeah.